Hello everyone, I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. I am down in the East Village in Calgary, celebrating Canada Day actually, and today I'd like to bring to you an interview that I conducted earlier in the week. It is with a guy that goes by the name the Renegade Investor. I've really been enjoying his content lately, and I feel like he embodies some of the ideals that got this whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency movement started. I think you'll really enjoy this interview. Even if you don't necessarily agree with all of his viewpoints, I hope that you guys can appreciate the amount of passion that this guy brings to the space, and that really comes through in all of the answers to these questions. So without further ado, enjoy my interview with the Renegade Investor. All right, hello everyone. I am here with somebody who is across the pond, coming all the way to me from England. So we had to figure out our timelines. It's morning for me. It is late afternoon, getting into the evening for him. But anyways, I'm gonna let him introduce himself here. Can you please tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from, all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. I've been watching what you've been doing over the last sort of few months since I got to know you, which I can't believe I didn't know you before a few months ago. But no, I just want to say thanks for all the work you're doing in the space as well. Like you got, almost 10,000 followers, loads of hits, like almost 500,000 views. So I think you're doing a great job for the Bitcoin community or the Bitcoin network as a whole. So thanks for that. And as for myself, yeah, I've been in Bitcoin for sort of over 4 years now. And I mainly focus on sort of the investment side and the social implications of why Bitcoin would be beneficial to the world. Those are the two sort of sides that I focus on my website, renegadeinvestor.co.uk. And most of the time, yeah, I'm doing, as well as doing sort of articles and updating the website with all the best content in the Bitcoin space, I also create educational videos for people on Bitcoin to try and explain it in entertaining ways, because obviously Bitcoin can get as complex as you want. So my goal is to try and break down complex topics in ways that people will understand, So awesome. It's not so much of a mystery.
That's great. Thanks for the kind words, by the way. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right into it. I've got a bunch of different questions I want to ask. If we get off on tangents, that's totally fine. So I guess let's just dive into it. Can you let everybody know that's watching, I guess, kind of what your Bitcoin journey was? What got you interested into it, and where did it lead you to the point where you are now? Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, so my background actually wasn't in investment or Bitcoin at all. Obviously not Bitcoin at all, but I started off in information technology, and I was very much part of the system, so to speak. I didn't have really much of a clue how the world worked. I was really stuck in that sort of bipartisan way that we live nowadays, left versus right, just not really knowing how or having any clue how the world worked. And I was working in IT for about 6 years, and I started to sort of piece everything together. Like, one of my bosses said to me that my expectations in life were too much. And I was like, that's a really bad mindset to have. And it started to occur to me that lots of people have that mindset. And then it started to occur to me as well as, when you start paying tax in your first job, it really begins to hit you how this system is designed for you not to get ahead. When you start chucking out, even when you just started the job, like you haven't really built up any capital and you're chucking 30% of your money out in tax, you start to question what this system is doing and how are you meant to get ahead if you just work hard, because then you just start paying more tax. So I started to piece everything together and going, this is just a really stupid way to do things. And I was at work one day, and this is a really pivotal moment for me. I was sitting at work, and at this point I had no interest in economics or anything like that. And I read one article about the bank bailouts in the UK, and that is that the RBS CEO paid himself a £7.5 million bonus after the second bank bailout. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, literally, that moment, reading that one article changed my entire life. I was like, what the hell is going on? This is ridiculous. And it was so shocking. I went home that night and I started reading about banker bonuses in, like, angry sort of fashion, going, what the hell is going on? And then in the comments section, someone talked about fractional reserve banking, and it was that one phrase that really hit home. I was like, so you're telling me the banks here have the ability to create money out of thin air and then lend our 20%? I was like, this is absolutely insane. And then when you realize that is completely institutionalized, wow, it was so shocking. I just started reading, learning everything I possibly could about economics, like Max Kaiser. Grew up on a diet of the Kaiser report. And then it
Yeah.
just spirals from there. You see all his guests, you start following them. And then I decided to quit my IT job and I started to work in a brokerage because I thought, you know, as I'm interested in investing, actually before that, I started to get into like gold and silver, knowing that all these currencies were probably going to go to zero. Yeah, so I started getting into gold and silver investing. Then I went to work at a brokerage thinking that I could build a career in finance, only to realize that that bored me. Like, it was so boring. Like, honestly, compared to Bitcoin, Bitcoin's like going out on the most wildest night out you could possibly imagine. And traditional finance is like going for cream tea in the afternoon. It's
Yeah.
just, honestly, which we like to do in the UK. And basically, after 3 months, I was like, oh my God, like this is at the end of 2013 as well, when Bitcoin was just going vertical. You know, actually, before that, I jumped the gun a little bit there, but in the beginning of 2012 is when I started hearing about Bitcoin, and I heard it on Max Kaiser's show, and I thought, this sounds crazy. That was at $2. And it wasn't until beginning of 2013 where I was like, Max Kaiser did a show where he was like, oh, I'm a Bitcoin millionaire. And I was like, all right, what is this? And then I decided to start investing in it. And I was like, wow, like I got in just to try and make money. I was like, I don't know what this is, but if I can flip it and make money, that'd be great. And in the end, I was like, it wasn't until I made my first transaction in Bitcoin where I wanted to buy some LITECOIN. So I sent money from Mt. Gox to BTCE, which I think is like a Bulgarian, I can't remember where exchange. It's like a Russian exchange or something like that. And I sat back in my chair after making that transaction when it took me like 3 minutes and cost like next to nothing. I was like, oh my God. That was the moment where I was like, this is so big. I was literally sat back in my chair with my mouth open, like, oh my God. And that changed my life forever. Doing that one transaction changed my life forever. And then since then, I've just been pure Bitcoin. I quit my job at the consultancy thinking that towards the end of 2013, Bitcoin was going to keep going up. So there was some tough times after that. But to be honest, I wanted to just work on my website. So I set my website up and I just thought, wow, this is going to be huge. This is going to absolutely destroy the banking system. And I wanted to spend my life doing it. So I ended up doing that. And now I'm full-time Bitcoin as of this year. So I'm really glad that it's kind of worked out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I hear kind of the same thing across the board where somebody they get exposed to it, you think it's a little crazy at first, and then you use it and you're just floored and you realize the potential behind it. And it is pretty incredible to watch. Seeing people have those realizations, those aha moments. I love seeing that. So I mean, I guess you've kind of already touched on it, but what value, like what are the reasons that you see value in Bitcoin versus other investments that are out there? Like what puts it above and beyond it? And keep in mind, some of the people watching my show, they may not know even like the economics of Bitcoin behind it. So like what things in Bitcoin, the technology and like even the rules governing it, do you see as valuable?
So I think the first thing is that it's important for people to realize that Bitcoin's three components. Like when you first get into Bitcoin, most people look at it and they think it's some kind of virtual sort of video game currency. But, you know, it's the attributes of the system and what make it valuable. So first of all, it's finite. So there's only be 21 million units. And that's probably one of the most important things right now because, you know, Bitcoin is primarily a counterparty and inflation hedge asset because of its finite currency attributes. And that's because every single bank around the world right now, every single country is just going deeper into debt. And the money's either created through fractional reserve banking, through quantitative easing, where the central banks monetize bonds in order to fund government deficits. And at the same time, yeah, I think now central banks are printing $200 billion a month between them. So there's a lot of, you can see that there's a lot of collusion between the central banks, and this system only has one way out. You know, when you look at it, this system relies upon more debt being created year on year in order to pay off the debt plus the interest that's accruing on that debt. And so the way I see it, this system is terminal. And so anything that can protect you from the inflation of that currency and protect your purchasing power is incredible. And Bitcoin not only protects your purchasing power, it's growing it exponentially. Like I was really surprised the other day when I wanted to go and buy something, and I think it was something that I've bought before, and there was an extra zero, and I was like, wow, my purchasing power has just gone up again. And that's the beauty of it. And I really think that at its core, Bitcoin is going to be the ultimate store of value. And so there's a lot of things that Bitcoin is going to move into, and these are all trillion-dollar industries. And a really good way of remembering all the industries that this is going to upset. So you have gold, which is obviously the store of value, remittances, which is incredible, which I talked about, where you can send any amount of money from anywhere in the world instantly for like next to no cost. Then you've got micropayments, which is going to come. We're not there yet because obviously the fees have gone up, but once we have hopefully layer 2 scaling and things like that, we will have a humongous micropayment market. And that market is quite small at the moment. It's around 13 billion worldwide, where, you know, once Bitcoin opens up, that could be a $1 trillion market. You never know. You've obviously got banking as well, where you can become your own bank. And like Obama famously said, you know, like Bitcoin is like having a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And then someone jokingly said, no, it's like having a Swiss bank in your pocket.
Yeah.
which I really loved. You know, I really loved that. And on top of that, obviously credit cards, where you can save, you know, with Bitcoin, you can save 2.5%. E-commerce, obviously, it's going to absolutely revolutionize e-commerce in terms of how easy it is to spend, and how you can do it globally without wasting any time. And obviously offshore as well. There's a lot of hidden wealth out there that I'm sure is going to start taking a lot of interest in Bitcoin. So even all those use cases, and a really easy way to remember that is Grumble CEO, because it's like GRMB CEO. And that's because Bitcoin is going to piss off a lot of CEOs who are running centralized businesses, who are just going to end up getting decentralized by this technology once it matures. And a lot of people look at the shortcomings of Bitcoin now and say, you know, does it really provide value? But they're not extrapolating out far enough. Whereas the people who are really investing in this technology, it's really important to look more than 1 year ahead into the future to see where this is going. And that is why it's getting so much value, even though, to be honest, like some people say, yeah, it's trading at a premium to its fair value, or the value of the network. But that's because people are already looking at the future potential of this market, and it's almost limitless. And on top of that, one of the important things I always talk about is the war on cash and how capital control is coming in. You've got the risk of bail-ins with like the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive in the EU, and capital controls. We've seen it in India recently, where they banned I think it's a 2,500,000 rupee note or something along those lines, which took out 80% of the money in circulation. And now talking about taking cash out of 75 of the cities in India. And I tell you, if India does it, it's going to go everywhere else. And this won't stop, because every single government around the world is going deeper into debt. And as they go deeper into debt, the need to service the interest on that debt is going to increase. So if it's not nailed down, the government's going to be coming for it. And I think ultimately, what we're going to end up with is a sort of a Cold War, almost arms race between governments cracking down on privacy and our ability to transact, which is what they've been trying to do with centralizing everything within the banking system in order to implement negative interest rates. And on the other side, you're going to have people who are working in Bitcoin, who are working on applications that are going to be increasing our privacy and trying to protect against all of those things. So it's going to be literally a Cold War arms race style scenario between those two entities. But ultimately, I think Bitcoin is going to be the ultimate protection. And there are just so many reasons that we don't even know about either. So it's almost limitless at this point. And that is why the risk reward perspective is like nothing we've ever seen in human history.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, just the fact that we now have a choice of what currency we use, the fact that you know, you can look at prices of items and see that your money is worth less over time, versus if I use this currency, well, look, it's consistently been going up for years now. And so just having, even people that don't maybe understand the economics of Bitcoin, at some point there's going to be that realization, well, next year I'm going to be able to buy less with this money in my pocket, and next year I'll probably be able to buy more with this money on my phone. So just for people that don't understand supply and demand and the economics of why Bitcoin is more valuable because it's finite, it will just be watching historically what has happened, and I think people will begin to connect the dots, even if they're not into economics at all.
And a couple more points on this as well is that the one you just talked about, supply and demand. The one special attribute about Bitcoin, which is different to gold, which has obviously been a store of value for 5,000 years, is that the demand side of Bitcoin is elastic, which means that it can go up or down to the infinite of what you can possibly imagine. The supply side is inelastic, which means that it doesn't matter how much demand there is, the supply side cannot change because it's programmed into the protocol that, 12.5 Bitcoins at the moment are created every 10 minutes. And that cannot change unless you made a completely extreme change to the network, which I cannot see happening for love nor money. So that's one important thing to take. And also, like when you're talking about other investments, like if you look at the sort of all the other main asset classes like bonds, stocks, real estate, all those things are historically at massive highs, where, to be honest, like in this country, especially in the UK, we've got the biggest housing bubble we have ever seen. In London, like literally rudimentary bad housing is going for like seven figures. They've blown the biggest bubble ever because the government has intervened in the markets, and that's the problem. Everything is overvalued because of government and central bank intervention in the markets, either through policies which are driving up the cost of housing, or through central bank actions such as low interest rates and quantitative easing, which is flooding the country with money, which is mainly going into asset price speculation. It does two things. It transfers money to the top 1% who owns those things, whilst at the same time increasing inflation for people at the bottom to buy essential commodities such as housing, bills, tuition, rent, fuel. And so, yeah, Bitcoin offers the ultimate risk-reward investment perspective right now. And one last thing is that there's $365 trillion in all other major asset classes. So, for example, you have 17 trillion in tradable commercial real estate, 40 trillion in tradable residential real estate, 70 trillion in stocks, 200 trillion in bonds, and 28 trillion in narrow currency, 10 trillion in the gold market. Bitcoin's market cap, even after the big rally we've had, is like 50 billion, which is 0.008% of the total value in all the other major asset classes. So you've got to pick your time to invest, because obviously Bitcoin goes through short-term bull markets and bear markets, but it isn't a secular bull market, which means a long-term bull market. So you've got to pick your time to invest, but in the long run, this is still barely off the ground, and that's what makes it so exciting as well. Yeah,
that's great. I love it. So when you're talking about I guess the current state of our economy and all the asset bubbles that are currently happening, and like some of these unprecedented bubbles, like in London, how ridiculous it is to get awful housing for stupid amounts of money. What do you see as far as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is concerned? What do you see, or how do you see it affecting the global economy? Like if it were to catch on and people were to get privy to exactly, I guess, why it's valuable, how do you see that affecting the economy as a whole? Or do you see something happening with the economy first and driving people to Bitcoin? Like, how do you see this playing out if and when Bitcoin becomes kind of I guess a mainstay of everybody's investment portfolio? How do you see that happening? What do you think will be the catalyst?
It's a good question. Like, I think the ways it's going to affect the economy are just so vast that we just don't even know yet. I mean, to be honest, I was expecting we're going to have to wait for a massive breakdown for this to really take off. But to be honest, the way the central banks have prevented that from happening, which could make it even worse in the long run. I wouldn't say that's a good thing, because all they're doing is building up risk on their balance sheet instead of having it in the market. So at some point that is going to blow up. But I think it's going to be the return of free market capitalism. At the moment, we are just suffocating under this almost communistic style Politburo central planning from central banks, from governments who have so much control over the way we live. And, perhaps when societies were not so complex, that could have worked. Like, it has worked to a certain degree, but at massive cost. Whereas now, our economies are so big. They're multi-trillion-dollar economies. They're full of like 7 billion people. You cannot have small groups of people working for centralized, potentially corrupted, fraudulent institutions trying to manage massive multi-trillion dollar economies. It's become too complex. And so I think Bitcoin has been born out of the fact that we need to move back to the free market, away from these corrupted, centralized institutions, in order for humanity to scale. I think we've hit a limit where unless we get these people out of the way, so that we don't have all the fraud, corruption, criminality, rigging of the markets, we can really create a society that can benefit and prosper beyond anything we could possibly imagine. Like you imagine, and there are just so many ways it can affect us. So first of all, it's going to provide accountability and responsibility for those institutions. So for example, they will not be able to just create currency, fund wars, have a massive welfare state, in order to pursue their own agendas of making people dependent upon the state, and also nation building, which then funds the ammunition factories that are owned by the big banks and these corporations. So it starts to push back against all those things, because you can do that. You can debase those currencies, but there's now competition. And I think it's the competing currency part of it that is so important. And especially, I think fiat currency has been the biggest driver of all the world's major problems, and especially with militarism, like the fact that you can go to war and you can just print the money up. You don't have to go to the people in order to get the money that you need to go and do that. You would have to then ask the people, and then obviously you go to everyone and say we need £10,000 to go and bomb Libya. They'll be like, no, they will be in the streets in the thousands. So that's one way in which I think all our money could start to be redirected back into our economies rather than wasted on all these foreign excursions. In terms of the actual speeding up, the actual acceleration of the speed of global and domestic commerce, I did one of my first articles I ever did for my website. I worked out that in Bitcoin there was I worked out there was 6.9 billion transactions a year in the UK. And I worked out that there's 3 different ways they're done: through BACS, which is a banker's automated clearing system; through CHAPS, the clearinghouse automated payment system. And I worked out that if you used Bitcoin for each one of those transactions, you would save 47 million years per year in transaction time. And that's just for the UK. So now you imagine if you apply that to every country on earth, the amount of time that could be saved, the efficiencies. Oh my God, we could have societies that look like those 1970s sci-fi magazines with like flying cars. Like, yeah. I honestly think it's going to be the catalyst to push humanity into like the next, almost like a type 1 civilization, a far more advanced, without any of the waste, corruption, fraud, where people and the resources getting directed to a few. And I think one of the most important as well, especially after 2008, is that people, it will provide it will provide a level playing field. The same opportunity for everybody, but at the same time it will also provide a playing field where you have the same risk of failing as well. So it's not like at the moment where the banks fail, they get bailed out. We won't have that. And so that means it's going to make everybody accountable, responsible. And that's where free market capitalism comes in. And all the best companies, all the best services are the ones that will survive. And the ones that fail, they take too much risk, they go out of business, they need to be bailed out. That will be a thing of the past. And that's what I really want to see, is the return of free market capitalism. And I think that is one of the most important things.
I like that you hit on the fact that with the ability of everybody to grow their wealth, there's also the equal opportunity to fail. And I think that's something that people are not used to, and so they're not as careful as they used to be. I mean, obviously it's very evident with banks. Like, they'll just do anything now because they can't fail, right? Like they're gonna get bailed out. But I mean, even when it comes to investing, you see a lot of new people coming into crypto, and they maybe put money into Bitcoin, but then you see things like some of these, not all alts, but a lot of them, and then some of these ICOs and all that. And so people just assume that somebody's going to look after them when something goes wrong. And so there's this culture of us, well, if anything happens, somebody will take care of me, it'll be fine. And people are learning that that's not the case, and you actually have to really consider where you're putting your money. You have to do your due diligence. And I think that's an important note to hit on, that with free market capitalism comes the fact that you need to understand what you're investing in and be careful with your money, because if something goes wrong, it's nobody's fault but your own. Obviously, there are nefarious parties that are going to try and scam you out of your money, but if you fall for something like that, it's in part your fault.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to it, because I don't want to have my hand held. Like, one thing I'll say about the current investment space, and this is what I saw at Hargreaves as well, and or a place where I used to work, it's that it's so emasculated. Like, the entire legacy financial system is so emasculated. I call it the central bank safe space, where everybody expects to not have risk. And that's why they're all looking at Bitcoin going, oh my God, it's so volatile. It's so risky. Look at this. And you're like, yeah, just get used to it. This is what it is. It's high risk. It's high reward. Like, if you forgot what investing is, like, it's not just someone coming along, pumping the markets in the background with a plunge protection team. Like, that to me, that's what makes it so boring. It's so sterile. Like, I don't want someone propping up the markets. I want Bitcoin to survive and crypto to survive on its own merits. You know, as soon as you have a centralized party in there distorting that fact, it just leads to risk further down the line anyway. And so, yeah, people just need to accept that Bitcoin is completely different. They're talking about bringing regulators in. Yeah, because that really worked well with the last financial system. Like, we've had every single fraud under the sun. It's like Bitcoin does not need regulators. In the free market, the way to prevent against scams and fraud is through education, reputation, and social ostracization of those bad actors. And that is all you need. And the reason why people are so frightened of Bitcoin is that because it's going to completely destroy their perception of their own reality, and they're trying to keep it. And that is that you need regulators and state or centralized control in order to make things safe and efficient and prosperous. And once Bitcoin proves them all wrong on that one fact in terms of the finance system, everybody is going to be questioning why we have it with every other single part of our lives, through governance, through education, or whatever. And it's going to literally be an absolute change in the way humanity thinks. And that's the reason why statists are so desperate to try and regulate it, because they don't want to see how a free market can create a much more efficient, safe, secure financial system compared to a centralized one, because it will destroy their entire paradigm.
Well, yeah, exactly. The second that there's a provable unregulated space that essentially regulates itself, all of a sudden regulators are out of a job. Right. So of course they want to regulate it, because that's their job. That's what they're paid to do.
Yeah, honestly, that's the crazy thing. Everybody who hates Bitcoin is going to be put out of a job by Bitcoin. Like, you look at the mainstream media, like, honestly, they're just getting destroyed by the alternative media anyway. But they all work for these big financial news rags like the Financial Times, CNBC, but they get all their money from big centralized financial institutions. So that's why I hate Bitcoin. The academics who grew up learning through their textbooks about how finance should be, they're all going to lose their jobs, because they're going to be replaced by people who understand technology and finance, and they didn't see it coming. So their reputations are going to be in the gutter. People like Paul Krugman, who again got the internet wrong, now he's got Bitcoin wrong. You know, these are people who have so much to lose, and that is why they don't look at Bitcoin from a rational logic reason place. They come from biased and their hate of it, and that is why they've been so wrong, and they continue to be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to dive into something that has been, well, in the Bitcoin headlines a lot lately, and that is the scaling debate. So I'm not going to spend like a super long time on it, because I'm sure people have heard enough of it. But currently there's a few things that are going on. We have the New York agreement. We have BIP 148. Bitcoin Unlimited has kind of just fizzled off and disappeared. I mean, it's still there kind of, but it's not even really in the discussion at the moment, I would say. So really we've got like this New York agreement, and we've got BIP 148, both of which activate SegWit, but the New York agreement coming with the caveat that a few months down the road, whenever it's slated to be, there would also be a 2 megabyte hard fork for the block size increase. So my question to you is, do you have a position, and why? So what are the fundamentals behind why you believe what you do, if you do have a position?
So yeah, my evolution of understanding in this space. So when this whole scaling debate first kicked off, I really didn't pay much attention to it, because there's people with knowledge on the technology side far beyond mine. They would always be like that, you know, like the technology. I mean, I'm fascinated by technology, but it's not, that side of it does not interest me as much as the sort of societal changes in the money. But I started to pay more and more attention to it as I got dragged further into this sort of industry. And the one thing that I've come down to is this, is that any change that should happen to the network should be done on its technical merit. And from what I've understood from following all the most important people in technology in the space, the most clued up, the most knowledgeable, is that Bitcoin Core have created what is considered an amazing technical achievement with segregated witness. That was a compromise from the start in order to increase the block size to it's like a technical increase to about, I think, 2 or 3 megabytes. It solves that problem. It solves the transaction malleability problem. It lays the foundations for layer 2 scaling and a whole host of other efficiencies and benefits for future scaling, such as MAST and Schnorr, which I won't go into. But these are all different ways that you can scale the Bitcoin network without doing a contentious hard fork. And the thing is, I was like, why are we not activating this? Like, I was looking at it from a common sense perspective of this offers so many benefits. Why isn't it being activated? And it's taught me one big lesson, is that a lot of people didn't want to activate it because they wanted to game the system in order to make more Bitcoin. So I think Bitcoin Unlimited, I don't know why it was created. I don't know sort of why Roger was pushing it. Whether it was created with good intentions is sort of, it doesn't matter, because the fact that we had Bitcoin Unlimited was then used as an attack vector in order to delay scaling, to drive up the amount of fees for miners. So, for example, they went from making $85 per block on average to over $1,000. So for them, this was like the best thing ever, having a way to prevent SegWit from being activated and resolving that problem. So for them, that was the way they gamed it. And I honestly think that all these distractions are just, I mean, Bitcoin is a game, right? It makes more sense if you look at it as a sort of like a massive multiplayer online game. And the game is to make as many Bitcoin as possible before Bitcoin hits the exponential growth phase of S-curve adoption. For those that don't know what that is, the S-curve is a way to sort of, it's a commonly used sort of chart to show the growth scale of sort of new technology if it takes off. So it starts off very small, goes exponentially almost vertical, and then tails off at the top when you hit saturation. So it looks like an S. And you know, I think that's the game, is to get as many Bitcoin as possible before it hits the S-curve, because once it hits the exponential growth phase, your ability to accrue more Bitcoin is going to be massively reduced. And so I think, again, things like Bitcoin Unlimited, now we've got this SegWit 2x, they're not born out of any technical merit. It's just some guys met up in a room like, okay, so they're quite influential in this space, but they haven't got any sort of technology to back it up. And they say they've got this implementation that they got like a few developers working on, but it's like, how has it been tested? Like, I used to work in software development and like for duty-free systems for companies like Lufthansa, Sun Express, and all these like airlines. And even those systems are so complex in terms of the technology development, the amount of safety checks. You have to put it into like a test net, then you put it into UAT test, then production before you even get it near the company, you know, like, or into like a business environment. And I can't even begin to imagine what it's like with Bitcoin. Like the fact you've got like $50 billion riding on this network. I want the best developers in the world doing it. I think that is Bitcoin Core, obviously. And yeah, I just think this is another delaying tactic. I think that all these people, they're sort of like a digital currency group, which has really pushed this. And I think there's a guy I follow on Twitter who really, I think, has got this nailed down. His name is @Bution. And he said, like, instead of using the protocol, they're trying to change the protocol to fit their business models instead of changing their business models to fit Bitcoin. And I think that's the major problem here, because obviously for companies to change their business model, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of risk. And so they're trying to change the actual protocol. It's like, and he said, it's like, it's like me using email for like 10 years and saying, I want to change my business model. So I asked them to change the email protocol. You'd be like, what? What? Are you crazy? So the way I see it, this has just been one big game. And I really don't think we're going to hard fork. Like I was chatting, the one thing that I've said again is that Bitcoin has that huge value. Going right back to the beginning of the interview, Bitcoin has value because it is a consistent store of value. If you have a contentious hard fork, and you have two, like Ethereum has, like that's going to spell tragedy for Bitcoin. And I think that I was more worried about this, but I actually spoke to one of my friends in the week who really sort of drew a line under this for me. And he said, his name's Javier Marti from Bitcoin Global Investments. And I was expecting him to be quite animated about the current upcoming risk of like a hard fork. And he goes, do you really think that the people that have been in this from the beginning, who've got hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars, who've got massive stakes in terms of the businesses that they run, are going to allow a hard fork to destroy the primary value proposition for Bitcoin. And I was like, no, like, why would they do that? So that really was kind of reassuring for me that all of this is just posturing to gain a system to get more Bitcoin before we hit the exponential growth phase.
Yeah, yeah, I would say I'm pretty in line with your thinking with a lot of that. I know that people get worried about the idea of a hard fork. I don't think it's going to happen, or at least I don't think there would be a fork to scale on the main network unless it was widely accepted and well tested, right? Like I don't think that inherently a 2 megabyte hard fork would be detrimental to the system overall. Most people have said it would be safe, but it needs to be properly tested, and to shove it through in a matter of a few months without even looking at anything I think is sloppy, and I don't think anybody's going to go. Well, I shouldn't say anybody, but I don't think a lot of people are going to go along with it, and because of that, I don't think anybody will go along with it until it's well known and safe to do. And that's just, I mean, I feel like that's a common sense thing. You know, I don't want them shoving through code that's untested and you know, that could cause problems down the road. So yeah, I
was going to say, and that's the thing, like, I think we really have one chance with Bitcoin, because if something comes up again, like the states, the banks, central banks, they're going to be straight onto it. Bitcoin is like our one chance. And that's why if anyone is, like, to be honest, it could be gains, but you've also got to look out for nefarious actors. And that is why if you do a hard fork, you've got to be sure it's not going to be contentious. Because if it is, if there's any chance it could be a little bit contentious, those nefarious actors are going to use it to like drive a massive line down the middle of Bitcoin, which will literally smash it into two. And that is what they want to do. And as make no mistake, there are just so many people out there that would love to see Bitcoin crash into the gutter. They would literally pop the champagne bottles, like, and that is why we have to be so careful with anything like that. It is, and that's why it's been 3 years, you know, and that's why we're at the point now. And so, I mean, yeah, it's been frustrating, but we've got to get it right. We've got to, like, it's not an if, it has to be.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to see how things pan out, because I think no matter what, people are gonna figure things out. Like, we've got a lot of really intelligent minds in the space working on this, and I have a lot of faith that with so many intelligent people cooperating together, that a solution will be had. But it'll just be nice to, after the fact, look back and go, oh, okay, so we did it. It's okay. Like I'm eagerly awaiting that moment, because, like you said, it has been a little exhausting listening to it for a couple of years here. But you know,
I can't wait for it to be over now. Like, so we can get back to properly, like, exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess my other question, that it's kind of a segue here, because we've been talking a lot about how Bitcoin is kind of the one, I guess it's our one shot. So with that in mind, do you see value in other types of cryptocurrency or digital assets? Like, do you see value there, or how do you see that into relation in relation to Bitcoin? Because there's a lot of stuff going on. There's I don't even know how many altcoins now. Some of them offer interesting value propositions and do things that Bitcoin currently can't. Others are just straight up, you know, ICO tokens that aren't even going to be used on the project. You know, that really have no value. There's a lot of stuff out there. So what do you see when you look at the crypto space in general?
Yeah, like, you could do another sort of 2-hour show just on this one topic. From the way I'm approaching all this right now is that I think Bitcoin is the main cryptocurrency. There's several network effects which make it so far ahead of the others, which I actually just did a video on my YouTube channel called Altcoins versus Bitcoin, why Bitcoin's network effects will make it a monster, because I wanted a way to try and explain to new people coming into Bitcoin. Like, because I've set up a lot of people in Bitcoin, or helped them get set up, provide them with information. And the first thing they do after I set them up is they say, I want to invest in Ethereum, or I want to invest in this altcoin. And I'm like, oh, you've really got to know what you're doing. And I know this from experience because when I came in 2013, I bought Bitcoin. Then I started chucking my money into anything which ended in coin. Like it didn't matter what it was. I didn't even know what it was. I was like, oh, WorldCoin. That sounds like it could go global. I chucked some money into that. So I ended up with a portfolio of like 15 Bitcoins. 15 different coins. And for a while I did well because we're in a similar situation to where we are now, where we've got everything rising in price. The old coins are surging, so you think everything is going to go up. You think all these old coins that are not worth anywhere near Bitcoin are all going to go up to Bitcoin's value. And I learned the hard way that a lot of these markets are cyclical. And I didn't take a huge loss, but I wiped out a lot of profit that I made that year. And that was a big lesson. And so I thought to myself, I really need a way to pass on that lesson to other people that are coming into Bitcoin now. And the way I explained it through this video is, sorry, 1 second. Sorry. The way I explained it through this video is this, so that I said Bitcoin, in this video, Bitcoin starts out as a mogwai from the film Gremlins, like cute, cuddly little thing, comes out the box, and gradually, like Bitcoin has to toughen up quick, so it becomes like a gremlin with claws and spikes. And that's what, Bitcoin's constantly under attack, so I had to toughen up fast. But when you get a gremlin wet, it starts to multiply. So it gave birth to altcoins, which is all the other gremlins. And so in Gremlins 2, like all these gremlins are all partying, having the time of their lives, like eating all the food and just causing havoc. And I'm like, this is what altcoins are like now, right? But then I say to people, but Bitcoin, whilst all these altcoins are partying, Bitcoin has been growing massively. Like it's got several network effects such as speculation, merchant adoption, consumerism, mining, development, all these different network effects, which all feed off each other, which are making it a monster. And the point is, then I showed it like, a gremlin turning into a tremor and eating someone. Then you've got an alien, then it turns into a raptor, then a T-Rex, then King Kong as it consumes all these different things. And in the end, I just showed it, it's Godzilla. And Godzilla, Bitcoin is the Godzilla of the blockchains. And so, you can invest in all these gremlins and speculate on them, but you have to understand that Bitcoin is the Godzilla at this point. And there's some rules. And I said, like, in gremlins, like you can't get them where. Okay, so that's the rules that I say you apply to altcoins. You can invest in them. I'm not against them. Some of them have some really good use cases. You have to be aware that those use cases, if they are good enough, could be applied to the Bitcoin one, because if there's a use case or a development that's good enough, it will be applied to the blockchain that's the most secure, which is Bitcoin. Okay, so that's one thing you got to be aware of when investing in altcoins. But there's 3 or 4 rules I say, and they're similar to the gremlins, which is don't get them wet with too much liquidity. Only use a small percentage of your portfolio. Shine a light on them, because obviously you can shine a light on them in gremlins, but shine a light on them so you actually see which ones are good, which ones are legitimate, which ones have a good development team, how good are the currency attributes, is the currency finite, so you got to look at all these different things. Is it going to have longevity? And what was the last one as well? Don't feed them after midnight, which means don't put money in late in the cycle before you crash 80%. So that's the rules. The rules for looking after gremlins are the same rules for looking after old coins. But I'm not against it. I reckon we could end up with 3 or 4 different coins alongside Bitcoin. But at this point, trying to guess which ones those could be, I mean, I haven't got a clue. That's why I play it safe. I have 95% of my money in Bitcoin, and I speculate with 5% in altcoins. There may be some that I will take a long-term position in when I'm more confident, but it's not something that I am rushing into. And, I'm definitely not looking to invest in coins or trading coins that are up like in the thousands of %, because that's just going to lead you to a whole world of pain. Like,
well, yeah, exactly. it's you don't want to join the party really late, right? So I would agree with your with your views there. Okay, so I mean, we're getting on an hour here, so I'm gonna wrap up with one final question for you, and it's kind of a broad one, but I always like hearing people's answers for this. So I'm gonna say, what does Bitcoin mean or represent to you? And I'll let you just go with that.
So the 2 main reasons I got into Bitcoin is, one, I think it's going to be the investment of the century. Like, if this goes mainstream, there's going to be nothing in the world that's going to be anywhere close to it. That's why I created my video, why Bitcoin will become the only game in town. Like, when you compare it to all the other investments out there right now. Now, there's a lot of risk to that, which is why you've got to be careful with the amount of capital you're putting into it. I say 1 to 5%. Obviously, I didn't give financial advice, but at this point, you still have to be pretty careful with Bitcoin. On the other hand, this is the two sides of Bitcoin that I focus on, I think are the most important, is that in 1834, Andrew Jackson said that if people only understood the gross injustice of our banking and monetary system, there'd be a revolution by morning. And that is exactly what we're seeing. 183 years later, people are beginning to realize that central banking is the biggest scam in human history. The Federal Reserve, the biggest rent-seeking operation we have ever seen, feeding off of everybody's taxes with the setup of the IRS after that. The way they've repealed the gold standard, taking us onto a fiat currency standard where they benefit from the newly created debt. And it is a pushback for hundreds of years, going back to like Jesus whipping the money changers out of the temple. This story is older than humanity itself. And it's time for us to take back control of our money, to take back control of our financial system, to have one that works for everybody, even the bankers as well. It's not going to exclude anybody, but everybody is going to play by the same rules on this financial system. And it's going to end the debt and death paradigm that the central bankers and governments have created. Debt and death, because debt, they're just creating as much debt as they want, and the death which comes from the funding of the military, where they're not accountable to the people for making those choices to go and invade those countries. So we're looking at something here which is going to solve some of the greatest problems humanity has ever seen in terms of wealth inequality, especially in America, like we're seeing with extreme wealth inequality there, and also with the amount of military interventions around the world, which is causing so many knock-on effects with like the immigration problems in Europe. I mean, this is endless. This is like Western civilization ending events that we can turn around with Bitcoin. It is that important. It's a fork in the road. On one hand, you have all these people trying to take us towards a centralized system of draconian control where we have no privacy, where they control everything we do. And on the other hand, we have a system here of Bitcoin offering us complete privacy, freedom, voluntarism in our relationships, a way for us to create a world away from all these major problems. And it's literally so, I can't believe I'm lucky enough to be where I am in Bitcoin. I never expected to be. I didn't know how far this was going to go, but every day it just draws me in further and further. And I can't even believe what is going on. It is absolutely insane. And I'll say to people, like, one thing that I see all the time is people trying to change the existing system by appealing to governments, politicians, regulators, judiciary systems. Oh my God, forget it. Forget it. The last system is gone. And it's like Buckminster Fuller said, if you want to change a system, you don't change it by fighting the old system. You build a new system that makes the old system obsolete. And that is what Bitcoin is going to do. And the one thing I would say is just that it's simple. It makes your life so simple. Once you're in Bitcoin, you just simply do not care what central banks and bankers do. Oh, I've raised interest rates 0.25. I just don't give a shit. Like, to be honest, I just don't anymore. I don't care about what politicians do. I don't care about what bankers do. Bitcoin is here, and it's going to turn, ultimately, I want to see bankers and politicians turned into washed up Hollywood stars. And that is what I think Bitcoin is going to do.
That's awesome. I love that answer. That's great. And so first of all, Ed, Renegade Investor, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I have been watching your videos. I loved the most recent one that you were just talking about with the gremlins. I thought it was really clever the way you threw that together with all the comparisons and like the rules of owning a gremlin. I thought that was fantastic. So I thank you so much for coming on. And before we go, can you once again let people know where they can find you, whether it be Twitter or YouTube or so on and so forth? Just let them know how they can search you and find you.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways you can follow me. The first is through my website, renegadeinvestor.co.uk, which I use for my own content and also sort of aggregation for all the best content in the Bitcoin space. I also am on Twitter, so at SharkyBit. And I'm on there a lot. I've had Twitter block recently, but I'm hoping to get back into that shortly. I sort of go from bit to bit, and I'm also creating a lot of video content. So you can go to my YouTube channel, Renegade Investor, which I link from my website as well. So those are the three ways. I've got more content coming. And yeah, I'm just really excited about the future. And I just want to thank you for all the work you're doing as well. And that's the thing I love about Bitcoin. It's just a massive decentralized network of people all working for the same goal. And it just seems to work. That's what I like about it.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for being on. Anybody watching, I will link to everything that Ed just mentioned below. I'll have his website, his Twitter, and his YouTube all linked there. So again, Ed, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, share this video, drop a tip if you're able to. A very happy belated Canada Day to all you Canadians out there, and to my American viewers, a very happy 4th of July. I will see you guys next time on the BTC Sessions.